When we look at the data every year, we're trying to figure out what is the difference between a good condition property and an average. What is that second bathroom worth? It's kind of interesting. There's been some years where, there's a lot of irrational exuberance, like in 22 and 23, where they didn't care if it was in good condition or not. And we were trying to make heads or tails of some of that data, and it was very difficult.
You're just like sitting there scratching your head and you're like, what in the world? Like, this was not like, why did it sell for this?
Yeah. And you'd have stuff on the same block, something that would sell, a 2-bedroom house that would sell for $200,000 and almost the identical thing sell for $250,000 within a month.
Welcome to Lawrence Real and Local, Keeping It Real podcast presented to you by the Lawrence Board of Realtors. We're your go-to source for all things real estate in Lawrence, Kansas. I'm Lexie Haskin with Bank Midwest.
And I'm Patrick Dipman with McGrew Real Estate. Together, we are here to make the journey to homeownership a breeze. Join us as we share insider insights, expert advice, and a dose of fun along the way.
This episode was brought to you by...
Is your driveway sinking? Sidewalk cracking? Or maybe even your patio starting to dip? That's not just cosmetic. That's your concrete losing support underneath. At Top Gun Concrete Lifting, we don't tear it out. We lift it back into formation. We use high-density polyfoam injection, precision foam that fills the hidden voids below your slab and raises it back to level with total control. No jackhammers, no heavy equipment, no waiting days to use it. Most projects are completed in just a few hours, and you're back in action the same day. If it's sinking, don't replace it. Raise it. Serving Eastern Kansas and the Kansas City Metro since 2019. Call or text Top Gun Concrete Lifting for your free estimate at 785-248-6990. Or visit us at topgunconcretelifting.com. Let's get your concrete flying level again.
Welcome to Lawrence Real and Local, Keeping It Real podcast by the Lawrence Board of Realtors. My name is Lexie Haskin with Bank Midwest.
And I'm Patrick Dipman with McGrew Real Estate.
And we are joined today with Brad Eldridge, who is our Douglas County Appraiser. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
So give us a little bit of background. Like, how did you get into this? Tell us about you. Do you like to go hiking? I mean, just give us a little bit of background.
Well, I grew up in Southeast Kansas, came up to school, went to school Baker. And when I graduated in the late 90s, looking for a job, the job I fell into was in real estate appraisal. And so I worked with a firm up in Kansas City for about 11 years. I had an opportunity to kind of move back to this area. And so I took advantage of that and came back and got a job with the county. It was a little bit different look than what I'd done in the private sector. But I was ready to get out of the big city and kind of come back. When I was going to school and living in Baldwin, this kind of felt like Southeast Kansas to me. You get to know people and develop community with everybody. And so it was nice to come back here with my family. And my boys were about 3 and 4 at that time. And so it was a good place to raise them and set up some roots here. Yeah.
So if people couldn't tell from us having the Douglas County Appraiser on here, people get confused about values, things like that, how it comes to. So we were like, this would be a great episode to just understand the county appraisal, different market trends, things like that. So we are very excited to have you on to answer just all the questions.
Wonderful. Yeah, there's lots of concepts, lots of law, lots of math, and there's a lot of questions.
We love math.
Exactly. And the market is interesting to as you guys know, to follow and try to see what the trends are. And so, we're working with all the different property types. And so we get to nerd out quite a bit with that information.
What might be the common misconceptions that people just have in understanding even what an appraiser does or what an appraisal is?
I think for us at the county level, what we're looking at is just trying to make sure that we have the fair market value from the appraiser's office. A lot of folks tie us directly to the tax bill. And so one of the misperceptions is that, whatever my value does, that's what my taxes are going to do. And so the reality is that the mill levies are set by local school districts, county, city, fire departments, public safety, things like that. And so our goal is just to make sure that the values are accurate and consistent throughout the county. And the budgets are what the budgets are. And that shows up in the mill levy.
Yeah. Interesting. So what is a county appraisal and what is its primary purpose?
To establish fair market value as of January 1st every year. And so we're going to go out and take a look at all the sales and make sure that we understand what that value striking point is as of January 1st. And then they can use all those values to come up with what the total asset value is throughout the county to figure out what each one of those taxing entities can do for their tax bills.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't think this is one of the questions we provided you, but how long does that take to evaluate every single home, land, like all of that?
It's a lot. So we have 50,000 assets that are office values. 42,000 of those are real property, and the rest of them are personal property. And so I have a staff of 15 people working on that. And so if you do the quick math on that, that's several thousand properties that we're touching each. And that's just on the value side. And so we're going to be taking a look at those values every single year.
Yeah.
And so it takes technology and it takes a lot of efficiency for us to be able to manage that, putting a good plan together before we execute it.
For a listener, you said real property and personal property. What do you mean by personal property?
So with personal property in Kansas, things like mobile homes that might not be permanently attached to the earth, big trucks. We are in the process of, there's a new law. We used to have boats and recreational vehicles and things like that were on the books. They had to pay taxes, but this year, actually, boats, mopeds, and things like that are no longer going to have a personal property tax bill. And so those are changing. One of the things I think that people might be off the radar is mineral rights, like for oil and gas. And so if you have a oil lease and things like that, we have to value those as well.
Interesting. I mean, I knew about those, but I just could over my head because it's more rural thinking. Yeah. Interesting. So how would you say a county appraisal is different than a lender appraisal, or just between that and the market value in general?
So with my first 11 years in private sector practice, I'm very intimate with that. Did a lot of bank work back in the day. And so the main thing is that with the bank appraisals, they're looking at one property at a time. They call it single property appraisal. That's actually a segment of the appraisal world. For the county, we're doing what's called mass appraisal. And so we're going to go and look at all the sales and costs and what the land's prices are and things like that. But we're going to look at them all together. And so we value all the properties as one single universe. And so we'll figure out what all the price points are for certain houses and uses and things like that. But then we're going to go back and take a look and see, are we consistent by neighborhood? Are all the 3-bedroom ranches of the 1950s vintage, are they similarly priced? Things like that. And so there's a lot of different statistics that we do and checkpoints to make sure that they're all reasonable.
Yeah.
How do you gather all that data then?
So all the sale prices are reported when a sale transacts. And so I'm sure you guys are pretty familiar with the sales validation questionnaire, and a lot of the real estate agents and title companies and bankers, folks, they have to fill those out when the deed is filed. And so they're able to give us an indication of when the property sold, when things closed, and what the sale price was. And then we get their contact information. And so we'll be able to reach out to them and check in with them to make sure that we understand whether that sale price is a good indication of fair market value.
Yeah.
Along with that, if I'm a homeowner and I see my valuation come, is there some way I can go look in and find an appraisal card or anything that I may be just as a regular public person? Yeah.
So the county's website, we have a lot of information on there. It's dgcoks.gov. And then if you go to the appraiser's webpage, you can look at that. There's also, I think they have property search on the main landing page. You can go take a look at it. And so you can look at it by address. You can look at things by owner. We use things like quick reference numbers and things like that to help organize the information. But right now I have all the historical tax information and property information. You can print out a property record card that tells when the property was built, what its square footage is. Most of them have sketches. Right now, I'm really excited because we're getting ready to make some updates to the website, and you're going to have comp sales out there. And
interesting.
So,
that's awesome, because I was even about to say that the website, even over the past couple of years, has gotten so much better.
We've been working really hard on that.
Yeah.
That's a huge jump, because I've seen in other counties, when I look at it, I can see like comp sales, but to this point, Douglas County hasn't had that.
Right. I've been working really hard the past year to try to get that going. There's with that database that we have with 42,000 records, everything is versioned for each tax year and trying to make sure that all lines up. And we've been also working, we have a really great mapping team at the county.
Yeah.
You guys are probably familiar with GIS. It stands for
Love GIS.
Graphical Information Systems. And so they put together a comp sale map that also prints out. And so if you're a taxpayer, when you get your notice this year, you'll be able to see that link on your property value notice, and then you can pull that up. You'll have to click on a link and answer a couple questions because in Kansas there are some laws that gives us some boundaries on that. So licensed real estate professionals, like everyone here at the table, we can see that information. The general Joe public can't just go out there and go fishing for comp sales for everybody's property.
Yeah.
Banks can look at them, and so attorneys can look at them, and property owners if they're wanting to understand how their values arrived at, or if they're considering an appeal. And so there'll be a splash page that comes up that says, "Hey, which one of these buckets do you fall into?" And then if you say, "I'm not in one of these categories," then it'll kick you out. But if you're the property owner, a licensed real estate professional, things like that, a banker, you'll be able to take a look at that information. And I'm really excited because it's more transparency for us, and that's what we've been going for folks.
Yeah, that does sound real exciting.
Yeah.
I like that.
So when these evaluations come out at the beginning of the year, I mean, in Kansas, our taxes are paid in arrears. So for 2025, those tax bills came out November, but then everybody receives these notices for their appraised value moving forward towards the beginning of that following year. So it could seem like it's maybe even lagging behind or lagging behind when they might have even purchased the home. So I'm trying to think of like the better way to say that. So why do county appraisals seem like they might be lagging from what things are actually selling for?
It's because of the delay in time. Our snapshot is January 1st every tax year. And so let's use 2025, for example. The tax bill that went out just a couple months ago, November, was based on what we knew of the market about 11 months prior. And because we are dealing with a large volume of properties and sale data, we do have to wrap up that job a little bit before January 1st because we have to have everything reviewed and ready to mail out by about February 15th. And so most of the sale data that we look at is things that have happened up to about October. And that's where we have the opportunity to validate all those sale transactions. As I mentioned earlier, we have about 2,000 sale transactions every year that we're going through and vetting and make sure if we can include them in our analysis. And, for residential houses, we have about 1,000 that we use each year to model with. And so once we get that core data set that we can work with, then we can come up with our valuations and move forward.
Yeah.
When your office looks at market trends, right now, what might matter the most?
Right now, I think supply and demand imbalance is what we're seeing in terms of, there's just not enough of the variety of properties out there that I think all the buyers are looking for. You probably are seeing that as you work through your transactions each day. I think that rising cost of construction is also an issue. Inavailability of land has impacted us a lot over the past few years, and so that's put a lot of upward pressure on land prices, especially in our urban core areas. And so, but I think that's going to be changing here in the next year or two. We have a lot of proposed subdivisions that are getting ready to come online here during 2026 and 2027. And so I think we'll hopefully be able to see some of that shake loose a little bit.
Yeah, because you started answering the next question about lack of inventory and how that could affect the county appraisals. And I mean, it really does. Because I mean, when you don't have as much inventory, then it does make the other home prices go up.
Yeah, supply and demand.
Yeah, supply and demand. Oh my gosh. So is there a broad pattern that homeowners should expect? Increases, decreases, stabilization in 2026? Or are we still kind of seeing like that upward pattern?
So overall this year, we're seeing around 4 to 5% on all property, residential and commercial. There's going to be some exceptions to that. You're probably starting to see it a little bit. I think, in the past 3 to 4 months, we're starting to see a little bit of price correction in certain segments. I think one of the things that we saw this year is some of the townhomes, the half duplexes and things like that starting to move in a different direction, but that's also isolated by neighborhood. There's we look at things globally, and then we also look at them by neighborhood or by segment or quadrant of the city, or by like Eudora and Baldwin and things like that. And so we look at them both ways, but overall we're looking at about 4 or 5%, and that's closer to what we used to see, in the pre-2020 market. Everything kind of changed from 2020 to 2024, and the appreciation has kind of slowed down, but that supply and demand imbalance is still there. We just, I know you guys read about it and talk about it quite a bit, but, I think that, and I remember the first time I went shopping, like around in the late 90s, there was over, I think it was like 650 houses on the market at that time. We haven't, it's hard for us to go over 200 in our local MLS right now.
Yeah.
And so that kind of goes, and we have more people. We have probably 20% more people than we have now than the late 90s. And so it kind of gives you an idea of where that imbalance is.
You mentioned quadrants. Whether you're talking about Douglas County kind of has quadrants, City of Lawrence has quadrants. When you're looking at determining what comps might exist, is it I would assume that most of the time you're looking within that quadrant, like you said, but depending on what's available, what the uniqueness of the house is, Lawrence is big, but it's not massive. So,
right. So we actually go a little bit more further micro broken down into neighborhoods. And so we'll look into neighborhoods, and they can either be by subdivision or kind of physical geographic regions by streets and things like that. But we create these neighborhoods where there's some consistency between the houses and that market area, the way it behaves. And so our focus point when we're pulling comps, we focus on the neighborhood because, as you know, location, right?
Yeah, location.
But the reality is, you have some of these neighborhoods where you might have like 99% of them are, traditional 2-story houses. And then all of a sudden you have a contemporary 1-story, 5,000 square foot house. And so we're starting to see some of those in, like in East Lawrence and Old West Lawrence. And so you might have to go outside the neighborhood a little bit to find a brand new contemporary house. And so,
well, and you mentioned earlier, like you're looking at every single house in town, whereas somebody who might be working with a loan officer and they're looking at what's just sold recently. So I'm not looking at every single house in town.
Yeah. And to kind of go back to, the disconnect between the timing of value and the perception during taxes, that valuation date going back to 2025 is January 1st, right? You get your first tax bill in November, about 12 months later almost than that date. And then the second half of that bill is due in May, the subsequent year. And so it could be like a year and a half later and you're looking at that tax bill and that value could be using comps almost 2 years before. Yeah. And so there is a timeline issue there for the disconnect. And that's why we usually lag the market or what the perception is on that.
Yeah. Something that I'm just curious about, we did not send this question to you. Technology with the appraisals and just like with the county appraisals. Have you seen anything like affecting it with AI, or have you thought about different ways to even incorporate that to make the process easier, faster? What are the trends that you're kind of seeing with that, even if you are talking to other counties?
So I think that's one of the interesting things about mass appraisal is that we have kind of been on the forefront of what that looks like, modeling, taking large amounts of data and figuring out what a bedroom's worth, what's a bathroom's worth, what's a garage bay, and things like that. When we model that, we're using a lot of statistics, looking at coefficients, what actually the dollar amount is and what the range is on that value. And so the AI helps us a little bit. Sometimes when we're coming up with those statistical models, if we're having a tough time making sense of the data, we'll try to see if it can help us make sense of that. But we're not at that point where we can hang our hat on it. You know,
obviously still review it, everything that. Yeah.
And so, I have to be able to explain everything that we do. And so I can't say, well, I checked into Google Gemini and it came up with this great thing.
The computer said like it's worth this much. So, it must be.
Right.
Yeah.
And but it's great for research for us. A lot of things we do is statute driven, Kansas law, and so we have a lot of that bookmarked, and we have our set of statutes that we work with. But every day, I've been at the county for almost 17 years, and I'm still learning new statutes. I'm diving deeper into some of the laws that don't necessarily govern my department, but maybe what the treasurer does or what the clerk does, and so that way we can figure out where they all overlap.
Yeah.
So 15 and a half people. And tons of properties. What does it look like from like start to finish of just a snapshot of looking at somebody's property?
So at a minimum, we have to look at properties once every 6 years. And that can be either outside the property or digitally. And so we have a lot of technology that we look at. We have our aerials that we fly every other year. That are just a straight up and down view. And then we also have some images that are called obliques that are kind of from about a 45-degree angle. And we fly those on the alternating years. And so, for example, we're going to be reviewing those properties at least every 6 years. If it sells, we go out there and look at the property to make sure we have good current information or if there's new construction. So on a single property basis, that's what that looks like.
So if somebody's looking at, say, their appraisal card, a lot of time you'll see history of different images, and somebody had went out there and looked at the outside and said, oh yeah, based on what they at least got their eyes on it. They weren't just sitting in an office looking at a formula and saying, yep, that's what it jumped to.
Right. Yeah. Our phrase is boots on the ground. We have all this technology, and it's pretty good most of the time. But you get into these established neighborhoods, it's very important for you to understand, for the 50 to 100 to 150-year-old homes, where the spectrum of condition is on those things, and those change over time. As the neighborhoods go through their different cycles and things like that. And so it's very important for us to have a good understanding what those condition of the properties are.
Yeah. I know we've talked a little bit about the data points that go into the appraisal, but are there some data points that matter more than others when coming up with the value? What are the main factors that you're looking at from that house? I know it's like the amount of bedrooms, neighborhood, things like that, and it's from a overall scale, but are there other specific data points that go into it that people might not think about?
I think that when the general person goes shopping for a house, they're not walking into it thinking, $10,000 for every extra bathroom. They've got a third car in the garage bay. I'm going to add another $15,000. I don't think the market is that sophisticated, but what we try to do is make those inferences. And so when we look at the data every year, we're trying to figure out what is the difference between a good condition property and an average. What is that second bathroom worth, in a 3-bedroom house, things like that. And so the market tells us every year. And so it's kind of interesting, there's been some years where, there's a lot of irrational exuberance, like in 22 and 23 where, things were selling in 5 minutes and they didn't care if it was in good condition or not. And we were trying to make heads or tails of some of that data, and it was very difficult.
You're just like sitting there scratching your head and you're like, what in the world? Like, this was not like, why did it sell for this?
Yeah. And you'd have stuff on the same block, something that would sell, a 2-bedroom house that would sell for $200,000 and almost the identical thing sell for $250,000 within a month. And you try to make the rationale logic and look at everything and line them up, and it just wouldn't make sense. But I think the market's getting back to a place where things are a little bit more rational, and so we can make some more of those inferences. There's some years where we go look at the data and the market really didn't care much whether the basement was finished, and that's not logical. But if you look at the sale data, sometimes it tells you that. But each year we take a fresh look at it. We have our last year's model metrics that we look at, test that, and then we see if there's anything kind of changes with preferences on some things.
When somebody does an improvement or a renovation, or especially if they actually go through the process of pulling permits, what does that do to the value of that home potentially? So
if it's a substantial renovation, it could change the value dramatically. For us, a lot of the information that we get is from the outside of the property. when there's a major construction project, we can go on site and we try to make sure we do a walkthrough on that. If it's new construction, we walk through the property while it's being built so we can get a feel for what the interior quality grades are and the layout. With the newer projects too, we're in sync with the city of Lawrence, and they have a lot of their plans available online. And so we're able to get that information and make sure we have a good understanding of that layout. But as you know, cost does not always equal value.
Yeah.
And so we're not tied to the permit value that they put on there. And we've all seen permits, they can say, oh, I'm doing $25,000 worth of work. And you go out there and they completely gutted it and picked it up and poured a basement and set down or something. It's there's a range there. And so we're just going to go by our factual observation to make sure we understand what happened.
Yeah. So you mail valuation notices in mid-February. People might be receiving them in March. And when that notice arrives, what should homeowners look for first when they receive that?
I think just making sure they look at the current value, because it'll have the current value, last year's value, and then we've recently added historical values on there. I want you to take a look at it and see if it's reasonable. At first blush, if it's $300,000, do you think you could sell it for $300,000? A lot of people, I think, know if they've lived in their neighborhood for a while what their house is roughly worth. I always found when I was doing appraisal work, my appraisal work is more background in commercial work, and not all commercial property owners had a feel for it. But if we ever did any kind of residential thing, I always felt like people had a good idea if they'd been in their neighborhood for a while, and so especially if they're in sync with their lender, or if they're their agent, or if they know have a good friend that's an agent, But I think that that's one of the things that we can take a look on that. Yeah.
What's say I get it in the mail? What's my timeline if I have a question or a concern in which I actually need to reach out to you all?
Get it to her. If they want to appeal the value, it needs to be in our office by March 30th. And so the state law gives you 30 days to think about it. We'll have our information online. And so when people get their notices this year, I'd love for them to get on our website, pull up their comps and see if they make sense. Our comp selection process is pretty sophisticated, and it about 99% it does a great job. But there's those one-off properties that, people might know, hey, this sold like third week of December. It might not have been in our system at the time when we were setting values. And so we can take a look at that and see if it makes sense.
Yeah.
Scenario based on that, let's say there's a house that value was $500,000, but for whatever reason it sold for $420,000. That potentially could be something that when somebody takes a look, they could reach out to you and discuss.
Yeah. And we have definitions of fair market value. As a lender, you've probably seen that, and you've seen in your appraisal process. And so we use that definition as a guidance on what makes a good comp, what's appropriate for us to use. First question is, was it on the open market? Was there any motivation of the seller? Is the buyer and the seller acting knowledgeably, which usually means they had an agent working with them, and so they had somebody vetting for their interests on that. And so we use that as kind of our checkpoints to make sure that we're using the appropriate comps. But a lot of the times, it's if something was off our radar, it's that December timeframe that can change things for us. And so.
So I have heard of, and I don't think it's necessarily been happening too much in Douglas County, but I could be wrong if I'm not seeing it, because you see what's being sold probably more than I would. So there have been companies coming in and just buying at different homes and neighborhoods and for lower than what they might actually sell them for, so they can drive prices down. So then when they want to go in and buy other homes, then they can get it at a lower. So then when they go resell or want to rent it, they can charge more. I've heard of that happening in other places in the country. Have you seen that, or do you also take a look at who's selling the homes or who's purchasing the homes to help figure out the values of those appraisals?
We try not to focus on who's buying what. And that's a fair housing law issue for us, because when we go to value it, we're not concerned about who owns it, and we cannot legally. And so But I think that, if you look at the landscape, the composition of our market, just over 50% of our housing is rentership in orientation.
Investors.
And so if over half of your market is a landlord, there's a good chance they're probably going to be a company, an LLC, or some kind of other investment group.
Yeah. That just kind of came on my radar recently-ish, and I was like, wow, that's kind of crazy. I mean, yeah.
So there's a lot of times when people will say, oh, my taxes are going up already, but the economy's not great or the market's slower. And can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah. Our values are one part of the puzzle. The other part of the puzzle is what the budgets are for each one of the taxing entities. And so like right now we're in the library. And so this is one of the taxing entities, what they go for. And the things that happened to this library several years ago were voted by the people. And so it's a very democratic process. But, each budget's going to be different. And it depends on what's happening with that tax base. And so the tax base means, if there's new construction, new value coming onto naturally coming to the local area for that. And so think about like the areas just outside of Lawrence where you see a lot of new construction. So those areas like Wakarusa Township, Grant Township up north, their bases are going up. And so their mill levies may be coming down each year because of that base. And so there's a lot of moving parts. The school districts have their other things happening. And so, one of the examples I give to folks is, I could lower everybody's values by 50%. It does not change what the schools need. It does not change how much money they need to budget for roads. We just had a decent snow last weekend, plowing the snow is part of the budget too,
Yeah.
And there's, hundreds of miles of roads in this county. And so there's a lot to maintain.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at what point should a homeowner consider appealing their appraisal?
Whenever they think it's out of line with the market. And so we have folks that come in and appeal every year just because they want to hear what's going on in the market. They want to check out the comps and be up to speed and just make sure they understand what's happening with their value. A lot of times when people appeal, it's because there's an issue with the property that we're not aware of. There might be a maintenance issue. There might have been a bit of flood in the basement that they had to rip out the finished basement. And so I think the appeal process is a great opportunity for us to make sure that we have good information on the home or whatever the property is. And so we can make sure that value is dialed in correctly.
Yeah.
So you talked about having the comps that are going to come online, but in the past, if somebody just didn't understand, they could go in and you could show them, hey, these are the comps that we actually use to determine.
Yeah.
And so somebody that wants to appeal at least can gather that information.
Yeah. So last year, for an example, we'd modified our standard procedures when people did engage the appeal process. When we scheduled them, we sent them their comp sheets with their scheduling letter. And so that way they already were armed with the information. Our goal is to give you all the cards so you understand how the value is. And, sometimes it's, a simple fact of like, oh, we modified the house. It's not a 4-bedroom anymore. It's a 3-bedroom.
Yeah.
We blew out a wall to make the living room bigger. And so it's some of those things that we want. If we can get those accurate, the value can be more accurate.
Yeah. So what evidence should somebody supply when they're making an appeal, and what are some common mistakes that people might make during that process?
I'd say one of the most common mistakes is focusing too much on the tax bill, because I have zero control over that tax bill. And so we definitely have empathy. We all pay taxes. And so we will share that moment with them. But, focus on reviewing our record with us and making sure that we have good, accurate information. The documentation we like to look at is commonly shared as photographs, interior photographs. If they have maintenance issues, if they've gotten any bids, if they want to share any type of, I'm trying to think, leases. Sometimes, if it's a commercial property or rented property, they may say, okay, our rents aren't in line with what your estimates are. That helps us understand what that is, what that difference might be.
Yeah.
For people that for people that own land, for instance, depending on what that specific use is, that also plays a role in what that value overall could be.
Correct. Yeah. So if it's got an agricultural orientation, if there's some type of production happening out there, whether hay protection, animal production, things like that, it would qualify for an ag. It's technically an exemption, but it's valued below market. It ends up being about 2 to 10% of whatever the fair market value would be. And so that's one scenario. If it's inside town, inside an urban area, we look at what the highest and best use of that land would be. And so usually if it's, zoned single family residential in a residential neighborhood, that's pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
When we get out on 23rd Street, it can be a little more challenging. We've one of the last significant developments out there was an apartment complex. Who thought that we were going to have apartments out on 23rd Street 10 years ago? And so things like that. And so, we look at what the most likely use would be, and then we look at comps that were purchased for that type of use.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were talking before about how you're going to have some public information sessions. Mm-hmm. So what's going to be going on at those, and who should attend, and when are they?
Okay. So with your valuation notice this year, we'll have an insert. It's going to have some information about those public information sessions. We are going to have one on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th and 5th Mondays of March. And so we'll have one in Lecompton, we'll have one in Baldwin, one in Eudora, and then one downtown at the courthouse. And so what we'll do is we're going to walk through the appraisal process, give a little snapshot of what's happening in their part of the market, talk about the tax bill, answer some questions about, why things have changed over the years. This year I'm adding, we just did a little bit of it last year and had a pretty good response of it, but I wanted to go a little bit more into the tax bill, even though it's not necessarily our lane. People had a lot of questions about it. And so I'm going to try to give them that information, like what percent of your tax bill goes to roads or first responders, schools, and things like that. And so try to get that information so they can understand that. The reality is, nobody likes paying their property tax bill, but I think was sometimes lost on us is that what that money goes to, things that we use every day, like the roads, and if we have an issue with something bad happening on our property.
Or emergency services, things like that. So are these sessions more helpful before or after people receive these valuation notices?
I think they can be helpful after they receive their notice, but those values will be posted on our website on March 1st. We've had some issues with the mail services, not everybody getting all their mail, and so I recommend that as soon as March 1st hits, if you're wanting to see what it is, you can get on our website and check that out. Print out some sheets if you want to come to those meetings. What we do is we do an information overview, and then we leave some time afterwards for people to just come talk to us one-on-one.
Yeah.
The other thing that we're going to be doing at the end of the month, and we did this last year, it was something new that we tried, is having just walk-in appeals. Yep. And so on March 31st last year, we just set up camp in the county commission's office and had 8 staff appraisers there ready, and we just had people walk in, and we were able to handle their appeal right then. They may just have questions. If they had enough information with them, we would just process it there on the spot. If they felt like they wanted to get some more information and then schedule something more formal, we could do that as well.
Yeah.
Besides Googling it, you mentioned it, I think, at the beginning. What's the website to gather details, information, anything? The
county's website is dgcoks.gov. And then go to property search. It's right there on the landing page, and you can go look up your information.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So before we go into our Fact or Fiction segment, what do you wish the public better understood about your role in your office?
I think that we're not focused on the tax bill. And, if you are able to engage one of our staff, it's the last thing on our list. I mean, if it's not even really on our list, our focus is making sure that your value is fair and consistent with everybody else. And so that's what our purview is on that.
I just thought it was kind of funny earlier. I mean, you said it very briefly, but when you're like, we talked about it. I mean, we pay taxes too. And it's like, Yes. It's like also just humanizing your office. It's like, yeah, man, that sucks. My taxes went up too. I got it.
Done nothing but go up. But, it's, I had a family. My kids were able to go through the school system. I know everybody has kids, but, we were able to enjoy a lot of different services here in this area in Douglas County. It's there's a lot happening going on. And that's one of the things I've really enjoyed working on the government side of things is you get to really see all the things that are happening. I encourage folks to go to a city or county commission meeting and hear what they talk about. You don't even have to get up and check in and comment. You can just hear what's going on each week. And it's mostly making decisions about budget, things like just next door, the senior center, trying to figure out what their needs are and how they're helping community. And that senior center helps a lot of folks with their tax issues too, filing their income taxes. And we have some rebate programs for seniors locally here that we just started in Douglas County and then also through the state. And
if you can't go in person, you can stream them as well. They are put on YouTube. You can watch those commission meetings.
Yeah.
If you're interested. I like streaming them personally.
You ready to play a little fact or fiction?
Let's do it.
Okay. The county appraised value is the same as market value.
Yes. And can I give caveats?
Yes,
okay, give us a caveat.
As of the valuation date. And so January 1st is when it's its accuracy snapshot. So it's at fair market at that point in time.
The appraiser comes inside every home every year.
Fiction.
And what did you say? Was it 6 years that the exterior?
Yeah, minimum of every 6 years. And so if you can imagine how many people we would need to go visit 42,000 properties, 30,000 houses.
Yeah.
Your property's taxes are determined by more than the home's appraised value.
Fact.
You can't appeal your county appraisal.
Fiction.
All improvements automatically increase your appraised value.
Fiction.
County appraisals always reflect what your house would sell for today.
Fiction.
All right, last one here. If your home's value goes down, your taxes will automatically decrease as well.
Fiction.
Okay.
There you have it, guys and ladies.
Rapid fire round.
Rapid fire. Yes. Brad, what do you want to leave us with?
Well, I just appreciate you guys being able to have me here with you. I encourage everybody to appeal their value. Even if they are not sure if it's right or wrong, come in and talk to us. They can ask questions. Our goal is to be as transparent as possible with how we came up with your value and answer any other questions we can help you out with. Sweet.
Well, thank you to the Lawrence Public Library for having us in this space. And thank you, Brad, for joining us. And make sure to like, subscribe,
and follow
and share.
All it. I guess if you subscribe, you're following and share.
Well, I guess if it was on like social media or something,
that's right.
You can follow us wherever you want. That's what we're working on, the ask. So, okay. Well, that is all for today. Signing off.
Thanks for joining us on Lawrence Real and Local Keeping It Real podcast. We appreciate our guests taking the time to join us. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review if you enjoyed today's episode.
For more information, please visit us on the web at www.lawrencerealtor.com. And remember, whether you are buying, selling, or simply dreaming of buying your future home, we're here to help. Until next time, keep it real.
And happy house hunting.